Imagine your digital portfolio, built on pure, weightless cryptographic code, just suddenly bleeding value. And the culprit isn't a software bug or some new regulatory ban. It's a physical stretch of water 7,000 miles away.
Right, the Strait of Hormuz, it's just this perfect collision of a paralyzed maritime choke point and digital asset valuations.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking at a wild scenario unfolding right now. We're going to unpack how a failed diplomatic summit in the Middle East is violently dictating the price of Bitcoin in real time. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really get the market reaction, we have to start with the catalyst, which was the U.S.-Iran summit in Islamabad. It just completely fractured.
Yeah, Vice President Vance and Iranian Speaker Ghalibaf hit some absolute red lines, didn't they?
Exactly. The U.S. demanded an affirmative commitment to abandon nuclear weaponization, and Iran, well, they categorically refused to give up control over the Strait of Hormuz or abandon their commercial transit tolls.
Which led to immediate fallout. The U.S. initiated active mine-clearing operations and a targeted naval blockade of Iranian ports. Commercial transit basically halted.
And that pushed Brent crude past $104 a barrel, which, acts like a massive thermodynamic friction on the whole global supply chain. It practically guarantees sticky inflation.
Right, and central banks can't just enact a less restrictive policy when shipping basic goods costs a fortune.
Yeah, that supply chain squeeze changes everything. The digital asset markets had aggressively priced in a diplomatic breakthrough, so when talks failed, automated trading systems just panicked.
There weren't enough real buyers to catch the falling price.
No, the floor just completely fell out.
Wait, hold on. We saw Bitcoin whip from a high of 73,820 down to 70,554. Automated margin engines systematically wiped out $1.7 billion in leveraged positions.
Across over 404,000 accounts, yeah.
Watching those long traders get liquidated, it felt like, watching people picking up pennies in front of a geopolitical steamroller. Is this just phantom leverage burning off, or are we looking at a deeper structural panic?
Well, what's fascinating here is the fundamental shift in the macro risk-free rate. It isn't just the leverage flush.
It's the oil.
Right. That $104 crude oil bleeding into the economy entirely starves the digital asset ecosystem of new fiat liquidity. High borrowing costs are choking off the capital that usually flows into speculative assets.
If you're listening to this and holding Bitcoin, seeing the market starved of liquidity probably sounds terrifying. How are the major players handling this pressure? Because we're seeing a massive divergence in strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Bhutan. They are actively liquidating their state-mined reserves.
Wait, they moved something like 319 Bitcoin to exchanges recently, didn't they?
Yeah, draining their stockpile by 70% from its tip.
Wow. Because the reason having slashed mining rewards. For a small country like Bhutan, the cost to mine is suddenly outpacing the value of the Bitcoin they produce. They're forced to sell just to keep the lights on.
It's a harsh reality. Post-halving network economics are just crushing smaller sovereign miners. But then you look at how corporations are adapting. Take MicroStrategy, or Strategy, as they're rebranded now.
Right, Strategy. They just publicly quantified their long-term survival math.
Oh.
This blew my mind. They announced they only need Bitcoin to appreciate 2.05% annually to indefinitely cover the carrying cost on their treasury.
And that's a carrying cost of $1.12 billion on nearly 781,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah, so what does this all mean? Have they basically engineered a debt-funded perpetual motion machine, or are they just delaying massive systemic risk?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they've engineered a mathematically rigid floor beneath their operations because they issue preferred stock that pays a yield as long as Bitcoin goes up by just that measly 2% a year.
Their billion-dollar debt essentially pays for itself.
Exactly. They mitigate the immediate threat of forced liquidation and pull all that supply completely out of the secondary market.
So Strategy is surviving this liquidity drain with rigid financial engineering. But that math relies on the actual trading infrastructure functioning perfectly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to regulators forcing exchanges to harden up.
Yeah, the Bank of Korea in South Korea is now demanding stock market-style circuit breakers for crypto exchanges, to automatically curb abnormal trading.
And the catalyst for that was staggering. An employee at the Bithum exchange made a fat finger unit entry mistake. They accidentally distributed 620,000 phantom Bitcoin to retail users.
With $43 billion.
How does a mistake that big even happen?
Well, it raises an important question about systemic operational limits. Bithum was, they were only cross-checking their internal database against the actual blockchain once every 24 hours.
That's insane.
Right, so the central bank realizes you cannot have continuous trading of a bearer asset without traditional volatility controls and real-time ledger reconciliation.
The market has clearly transitioned from an isolated cryptographic experiment to an institutional asset inextricably tethered to global energy logistics.
And strict quantitative risk models. It all circles back to the physical reality of the Persian Gulf.
Which leaves you with something to mull over as you check your portfolio today. If a single physical maritime choke point like the Strait of Hormuz can instantly rewrite digital asset valuations, is Bitcoin actually more tethered to the physical thermodynamic world than the fiat currencies it was built to replace?